Name's Johnny. Johnny the Whiz Kid. You know, life was so much simpler in the 80s. That's why I like trending the lifestyle and reliving it. And it can be fun. And it can also make you reflect on the past a lot. Sometimes we're just better off. Or at least I try to be. And I don't know about you, but when something affects you, it makes you question and navigate your daily life choices. And what I've been reflecting a lot is everything that has happened these past couple years that led me to where I am today. Being red pilled. And I didn't understand what it meant when I hear a person has been blue pilled or red pilled, and I wasn't sure whether it's a good or a bad thing. Well, that depends what political side you're on. But that's the thing, though. I never wanted to be on either side. I never wanted to be involved with politics to begin with. I'm someone who just wants to get on with my life and avoid politics like it's the plague. That's what a majority of us regular folk would rather do than bore ourselves with complex issues that we deem unimportant or take lightly because our lives are just fine the way it is, regardless of what happened. Until today, when I drank the Kool-Aid. Oh yeah. I drank it. From being apathetic, I don't ever think about politics and just live my life pursuing a long life goal of my own. Traveling and going to conventions, geeking about anime, cartoons, movies, and video games with friends and other nerds I meet. But things have changed drastically since Trump started running for office. Nearly everything has gotten so political where we just can't enjoy things like we used to anymore. It all started in 2018 with The Last Jedi. I love movies, but not only did they ruin Luke Skywalker, this seemed a little too political to begin with. I started to notice that Hollywood as a whole had taken a turn toward wokeness, and it's only gotten worse from there. I then started noticing independent YouTubers like Geeks and Gamers, No Bullshit, and Memology 101, just to name a few, commenting on the political situation of our country, and that helped to expand my theory on the direction that we were headed. Other YouTube personalities were discussing economic issues, and I realized that at the base level that our economy was under attack from cancel culture. When Hillary Clinton lost the election in 2016, it became apparent that identity politics were beginning to rule the country. We saw the Me Too movement, which told us to believe all women without even questioning or considering the evidence. The woke mob started coming after straight white people. SJWs, or social justice warriors, were canceling food brand logos like Aunt Jemima and Land O'Lakes Butter Maiden. And then celebrities and athletes started calling attention to themselves under the guise of caring about police brutality and racial issues. I mean, Jussie Smollett? God, gag me with a fucking spoon, why don't you? Most notably, Colin Kaepernick taking a knee during the national anthem started a wave of protests against our nation from the limelight. I also just started to hear about Black Lives Matter, or BLM for short. When the hype of all that simmered down, the liberal left started throwing a fit about what's going on at the border when Trump wanted to start building the border wall. The temporary centers that Trump set up to keep children safe while they determined that they were with family or not were being compared by Congress people to concentration camps, especially by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. After that, a video by Turning Point USA was posted of Holocaust survivors criticizing and debunking her political remarks. It made me confused on why we have politicians like AOC lying about such things. This all went on for 3 years, and while I was getting anxious about the upcoming election, everything changed when I started seeing photos and a video of a police officer kneeling on a black man, and I had to find out what really happened. The unrest started and everyone was going crazy. Violence isn't going to change anything, of course, but people just don't give a shit. And they started to destroy stuff because they just wanted to take their anger out on innocent people who had nothing to do with anything. It's totally not fair to anyone, especially not the small business owners who had their livelihoods destroyed by the rioters. I almost brushed it off to think that this was just going to be one time, but I did not expect that it was going to be spreading around the nation. It wasn't just Minneapolis, it was Los Angeles, New York, Atlanta, Portland, and Chicago, which were all major Democratic cities. I've been monitoring everything that was going on through Twitter. A lot of people were scared and we knew it wasn't safe anywhere. It definitely stirred up a lot of outbursts across the entire nation. When this was supposed to be about black lives being in danger because of police, I knew that wasn't true. I've seen on TV and through the media my entire life that there are some cases of police brutality among other citizens. But it isn't based on race, and it isn't at all, or even most police officers. There is no conspiracy whatsoever. It happens to white people too. At some point during all of this, a friend sent me a meme which depicted a house on fire while the neighbor was watering his own home with a garden hose, which was supposed to represent saying all lives matter is like spraying your own home while the home next to you is in flames. It doesn't make any logical fucking sense. Because of the racial tension and the trending hatred of law enforcement, they started censoring children's media by removing Elmer Fudd's guns in the new Looney Tunes show, removing police figures from Legos, and even tried to cancel Paw Patrol because of Chase, the police dog, being one of the main characters of the show. Other companies like Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft made pointless one-time promotions of BLM, but it didn't mean a damn thing, like they cared. They were just pandering to the left so that they can keep selling their products. HBO Max stepped in and removed Gone with the Wind for being too racially insensitive. But regarding systemic racism, the entertainment media was removing anything racially insensitive. In Washington, politicians were virtue signaling big time. Remember that stung with Nancy Pelosi and others dressing up with those African cultural clothing and kneeling before a statue or in that big room? Whatever. It was all absolutely hellacious. But because of this trend of censorship, a lot of Twitter users complain about various things that they deem too offensive that provide sponsored companies the power to cut ties from various people. Like Gina Carano, and Pedro Pascal gets to post offensive things all the time, and he gets off scot-free? Get the fuck out of here. I ran a few Facebook groups that were meant for fun, so I had to set some ground rules to not allow any posts regarding BLM or any real-world issues to avoid any pandering or controversial issues. Naturally, I was challenged by many and lost some friends and followers, and I was criticized for lacking empathy. I ended up having to suspend someone for being too pushy against the new guidelines, and I was accused of being a racist and supporting a rapist like Donald Trump. I have no fucking idea what that story was about or why it was even brought up to begin with, but that wasn't the point. Some were being irrational, and so I had to ban a few people for being so dangerous. And then they started to slander me to my friends, so I had to block them too. There was even an attempt to dox me, and I was genuinely afraid I would lose my job. Thankfully, it was just a scare tactic, but that was when I experienced firsthand a radical activist and a mob rule. That opened my eyes to how real the hatred and anger was among liberals. People really were just throwing tantrums, and it was never based on real facts. Toward the end of the unrest, we saw the very short-lived Seattle Autonomous Zone. Townspeople and rioters were dismantling statues, protesters were vandalizing public property, and I was getting really depressed. The idea of what was happening to our nation was almost unbearable for me, like many others. It even got to a point where I thought of suicide. These liberals hate everything about our country, and I didn't think it could get any worse. But it was then I heard about the campaign of defunding our police, and my thought, this just got way worse. Without police, we would be heading toward complete anarchy. We would have a lawless country with nothing but crime, like Gotham City. Or even Townsville, if you want to count that. I wondered how we would ever keep our cities safe from people when they want to use social workers to do the job instead of police officers. But it just never ends there. A new term that was brought up during all of this to me was white privilege. I even saw a video where a man walked up to white people and asked if they would kneel in front of him and repent for their whiteness. And they did. I couldn't think of anything more mortifying than submitting to such an accusation. I even saw it with the police and military kneeling. It is beyond degrading, but people are too fucking afraid of being labeled horrible names, and BLM was taking advantage of that and walking all over them. It is still very infuriating. Because of all of this, we saw police officers resigning in droves for lack of support and funds. It was still a horrible situation of unrest, and white people were ostracized. Police were demonized, and even came to the point where a Trump supporter was murdered on the street in Portland, and they celebrated it. If that doesn't spell heinous to you, then you need to open your eyes more. Antifa was getting involved as well and teamed up with BLM, making it even more terrifying. When we started seeing Back the Blue as a counter to BLM, a girl was killed for saying all lives matter. Some justified it, some labeled her horrible names, and some even say she deserved it. I just couldn't fathom such evil. We started gearing up closer to the election, with CNN and MSNBC still reporting the civil unrest. Chris Cuomo defended the riots as protesters, despite the obvious destruction they have caused, and politicians like Maxine Waters encouraging and even inciting violence on white people that she deemed problematic. I then started to learn the true colors of the Democratic political party, especially when the mayors refused assistance because it was coming from Donald Trump. They would rather let their city burn and people suffer just to spite him. How petty can they be? Kids got thrown into the mix and used as shields or scapegoats. Even forced indoctrination became apparent. Critical race theory and the 1619 Project started to pop up in public schools. I was at one point afraid that they would literally ship children off into re-education camps. But no! Later on, I realized they already were. Liberal radical left-wing activists are generally Marxists, which basically tells me that they're terrorists. And we have them pushing this on our children in schools. When the COVID-19 outbreak hit throughout all of this, small businesses were still closed up, but the Democrats were defying their own lockdown rules. We had Nancy Pelosi going to a hair salon, Newsom eating out with friends, Lightfoot partying, de Blasio as well, and Ted Wheeler taking part at the BLM Antifa riots. These are only a few examples, but it makes you question what the actual reason for the lockdown was. I know COVID's real, but these politicians don't seem concerned one bit despite the excessive insistence on the mask mandates, yet they publicly go against everything they preached? Why? Businesses were destroyed, they couldn't put food on their tables, they couldn't be with their dying families, and suicide rates are up the ass. All because of them and their disingenuous policies. Almost like it was all politicized. They enforced the rules, but refused to follow them themselves. Rules for thee, not for me. With November getting closer, I started to have a really bad feeling about the election. The mainstream media was spreading propaganda left and right, and I started to believe Trump was innocent of every single thing that they accused him of, just because of how outlandish the Democrats had gotten. The election itself was starting to become sketchy at best. COVID had brought the golden opportunity for Dems to encourage people to vote from home and have ballots brought to the elderly and encourage them to vote for Biden. Ilhan Omar wanted ballot harvesting, which would give opportunity to doctor ballots. We saw ballots dumped in ditches and dumpsters and even being shredded. In Pennsylvania, we had media documentation of ballot counters breaking protocol to count ballots in private. I had a bad feeling that this election was going to be rigged, but I was hoping that Trump would still win. Trump continued to fight, but more Trump rallies only brought worse reactions from BLM and Antifa. I was under the impression that your typical election year is where you can vote for whoever you want despite opposing political opinions and without fear, and everyone can at least somewhat respect the winner. Well, at least civilized people. But this year was different. We felt like Trump needed to win because we felt like our lives hang in the balance of this election. Biden does not want anything to do with us. Biden doesn't want to do anything good for the American people. How could he, when he spouts nonsensical gibberish,
true international effort to pressure,
off of teleprompters, or even speak incoherently,
you know the thing,
has no clue what he's saying or even remember what he is? How can anyone with common sense see this old geezer, even capable of running our country, or even remotely be more popular when he has small rallies compared to Trump's ocean rallies, and makes racist comments like,
if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
He was accused of being a pedophile because he likes to sniff kids, and other grody things he said regarding children.
And I've loved kids jumping on my lap.
Things were just getting more and more overwhelming, and we were catching on to more of strange behaviors as more ballots were found that had been lost. Big tech began censoring conservative voices, including on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Celebs celebrated this, but it was just virtue signaling for more attention, of course. Arnold Schwarzenegger even compared Trump supporters to Nazis, stating that Trump rallies were like the night of broken glass in Austria, where he grew up. Get fucking real, man! Despite all this, Trump was way in the lead. It seemed like a landslide victory to me, and there was no way people wouldn't see Biden as not just as an unfaithful candidate, but the man was too old for the job. But suddenly, the numbers turned overnight, and it didn't seem legit at all. Trump was warning people about a possible rigged election because of ballots being counted behind boarded up windows and Dominion machines being hacked. Corrupt politicians began really showing how much they hated America, with Ilhan Omar going so far as to suggest that canceling the 4th of July and the 9/11 memorial. When Trump wanted to investigate the obvious election fraud, the Supreme Court rejected the case. This is what made me lose all faith in our judicial system. But it was just more intimidation from the angry mob that caused the Supreme Court to fail us. Then we get to January 6th. On that date, while the ballots were being counted at Congress, Mike Pence had one job: to prolong the election. We all knew that Trump won, but Pence failed to complete his task that was appointed to him by President Trump. Instead, he betrayed him, just like Judas betrayed Jesus. Trump held another rally to stop the steal that day, and those in attendance were going to protest peacefully at the Capitol afterward. Before they could walk there were already people inside to protest. Even then, those people were instigated by Antifa infiltrators among the Trump rally. It very well could have all been a trap, and we all fell for it. Seeing the news of that day, I thought, this is it. We failed. Our country is now going to suffer. I thought about fleeing America for Japan to write it out until our country was back to normal, whatever that would mean after all of this. I was even more depressed than I was the summer before. After that fateful day, a lot of people were arrested, a lot were denied a flight back home, Trump was banned from social media while he was still the sitting president, and he was impeached and acquitted for a second time, while the first one was over a ridiculous hoax of a phone call. It was the most egregious thing I've ever seen in my life, because they said he was inciting an insurrection. They lied about him with the Lafayette Square. They lied about his Ukraine call. They lied about the Russian collision. And now they're saying he incited an insurrection, which was now debunked by the FBI. Everything Trump has said has been politicized by the media and used to weaponize against him and anyone that sides with him, labeling him as xenophobe, white supremacy, a dictator like Hitler, and especially racist, which now holds no meaning whatsoever. After Trump left, I decided to delete my Twitter and Instagram account. Since then, I became a full-fledged Trump supporter because this was all about uncovering the truth. People were manipulated and misguided, blinded by rage, all for their votes so that they can remain in power and do whatever they want. It didn't matter who, they just did not want Trump in office, and Biden seemed like the lesser evil to them. And all this led me to believe that the Democrats are just plain evil. Today, we're dealing with many more problems, like the border crisis Biden had to open up just because Trump closed it. Our public schools are becoming more and more the indoctrination camps we had feared with critical race theory, which teaches kids to hate America and react to the color of people's skin, even grooming them and changing their sexual identity and their pronouns. Fuck pronouns! Inflation were prices of gas and food skyrocketing, and now Afghanistan. Again! And we are seeing crazy bills to give Democrats even more power among the courts and voting control. And the media is silent on all crimes not related to the narratives that they want to push. They are effectively manipulating history to fit that narrative by twisting the minds of both children and adults. They want to reimagine the country to fit the image they want to project. It's literally a movie plot of world domination, starting with America, where reality is in fact stranger than fiction. When it comes down to it, Trump was the reason all this is happening since the female Ghostbusters film was made, because for some reason, he was the only concern on everyone's mind over at Hollywood. Rather than do their fucking job on giving us good products, they try so hard to try and dissuade us from seeing him as a good person.
Open your eyes. We are teetering on a dictatorship.
Everything he tried to do good at, no matter how much proof we present to everybody, he is still labeled as a xenophobe, a racist, and a second-rate Hitler dictator. And because of the shift in this trend, we're now in a time where we can't have nice things. We can't do anything normal we've been doing for years, and we can't say anything that was never a problem before.
You say that I'm not allowed to have an opinion on people because they're a different color than me, but yet you get to have an opinion even though their skin color is different from yours.
All because of a new culture we're in. Political fucking correctness!
That's why you say, oh, Black Lives Matter. No. All lives matter. That's including black people, that's including Hispanic, that's including gay, straight, whatever your orientation. Every single person lives matter.
You know, Trump's words rang truer than anyone anticipated. He said, they're not after me, they're after you. I'm just in their way. And after everything he has warned us about, he was right. In what way, though? Whatever diabolical scheme the deep state is after.
The tone is already being set for a leftist agenda.
Whatever deal they made with China, whatever everything Trump stood against that made every higher-up hate him so much that they would go through extreme lengths to keep him from running for office again.
前边特朗普政府跟我们打贸易战。那么我们为什么搞不定特朗普政府？
I think Joe Biden and the Biden family are compromised with China.
Whatever the reasons are, Trump has exposed what they really are, who they really are, and what they want to bring to America. And from what I've seen, heard, and experienced, I believe it now. I believe anything now. Socialism, communism, the Great Reset, world domination? Yeah. Reality is stranger than fiction.
Because when you control every single channel of information, nothing else matters.
But this is why I'm a Trump supporter, and I dare you to call me a white supremacy. I even dare YouTube to flag me or ban me, because I promise them I won't let this go unchallenged. Our democracy is under attack, and I won't stand for any bigoted authoritarianism action against those that are supposed to be protected under the Constitution. They're afraid of us for having a voice. They're afraid of Trump for having the power and the influence. And they're afraid of losing whatever position they have over us because of Trump, for fighting for our rights and our way of life. We didn't have to agree with anyone politically or religiously before all of this. And now if no one speaks out, how are we ever going to return to that? Since Biden took over, there have been no progress made whatsoever since ever from this corrupt political party. The same party that supported slavery is working hard to enslave gullible minds just so they can stay in office. They're the enemy. The mainstream media, activists like BLM, Antifa, Hollywood elitists, the Squad, Big Tech. They're all responsible for the many things that have led us to where we are right now, and I'll never forgive them. And standing up to them just feels the right thing to do. But really, this isn't about Trump. This is about our lives. These fucking activists, man, talking down on our founding fathers and nation, taking advantage of freedom of speech to spread propaganda and lie. The same men that fought and died for our country are labeled as white supremacists. They can all go to hell. And even if I knew that to be true before, I still didn't want to get involved. But they made me do it. And you can argue that I made that choice. Well, yeah, I made that choice. But I didn't have to if they left everything alone. So instead, they made me choose. And by exposing what kind of people they really are, what they want, what they've done, and how we're living under PC culture, starting with our entertainment, it has made me involved as much as any normal person in this world. It is our concern now, and it should be yours too. I'll never bend the knee. I'll never apologize for my skin color or my race, and I will never submit to any intimidation or threats that dares to come after me again. I refuse to! When you try to silence somebody, you ain't proving them a liar. Just your own fear of what they're about to say. And I ain't afraid to say shit or call anybody out. It's my First Amendment right. I just can't stress this enough, even though I may sound like a broken record. But it isn't being censored that frightens me. It's living without ever doing our best to stand up for each other. I just want our lives back to normal already. And after everything I have witnessed throughout the whole year, it led me to where I am today. Being a Trump supporter. I have dreams and goals, and I'd be damned if I ever bend the knee to the mob than ever to resist their Marxist radical ideologies. To quote someone, I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees. And I'd rather die from COVID than live under tyranny, lockdowns, isolation, and depression. Which is why, for the most part, I think for myself, which is what everyone needs to do now. Because everyone is waking up to this, and we're not going to take it anymore. So don't think for a moment that I am a lost cause. Because of every independent YouTuber that I follow whom have opened my eyes to reality with facts, evidence, and even their own personal opinions, I made the choice based on my own conscience of who I decide what to believe. Based on everything I have witnessed, read, and listened, I believe what they're saying. And there's a lot of things I don't know yet. But what I do know is all of what's happened, it ain't Trump's fault. And where we are right now that he predicted is a crisis. And we all gotta stick together. If we can't unite with facts and reason, I see no reason to live like this. And I don't want us to be this way. We have to speak up on this, fight this evil movement, and I believe we can take back our country. Everyone's getting in on the fight, and I want in too. I want a piece of the action. Let's go, Brandon! I also got this coin. You know, y'all used to like Donald Trump from the movies. Maybe you should again.